take it away.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. So good to see you. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. Tonight, Jeff is going to touch on current events. He's going to give us some updates, and he also wants to talk about the westernized world versus the world of communism. Big deal. But our topic for this evening is our God-given intuition and how that ties to our astrology. I know for me, I don't go with my intuition enough. And when I really investigate that, I feel like there's a force trying to repress it. And I was talking to Jeff about this, and he said, we're going to go into something very, very interesting tonight. So let's get started, Jeff.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, the first thing I'll talk about, the media and the news, Howard Stern, everybody's abuzz over Donald Trump. Well, I said our last podcast, I didn't think it was going to get legs. I just don't think they're going to be able to indict him. And even if by a remote chance they do, I don't think it's going anywhere. See, the interesting thing is, there was just a 2018 letter that surfaced that basically showed that Cohen, which was Trump's original lawyer, made the payment directly to Stormy Daniels, not Donald Trump. So I don't think they're going anywhere. It takes 23 people on a grand jury to indict. And I've been hearing leaks and rumors, and it's been all over the news as well, that literally the majority is not there to indict him. So they're having a hard time. And like I said, they're going to try and take Donald Trump out. If he makes it into the summer or the fall, then he starts getting out of the woods. But I think they're going to try and harpoon him any way they can, whether they kill him or they try to kill him. There's already been assassination attempts on him, and they're certainly trying to assassinate him legally. So I don't think this is going to get legs. That's what the chart says. And even if it does, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think it was Robert Costello who testified that like hundreds of documents were not presented to the grand jury. And they're saying the same thing from what I'm hearing, is that there's people not willing to do it. They had a lot of dissension in the ranks with the district attorney. So we'll see where it goes. If the chart's right, I don't think he's going to get indicted.
Yep. Well, that's what the chart showed when you checked it out a couple days ago. So there you have it. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot about intuition. You received a letter this week, a handwritten letter from a viewer. Very, very, very sweet, heartfelt letter. And you're going to address that tonight, but very, very sweet woman. And I can't remember the last time I received a handwritten letter. Everything is text, everything is email, but very, very special.
Well, I think what struck me the most about this letter, and I don't want to mention her name on air because she might not want me to, but I was really struck. I got the letter today in the mail, and it was 3 pages. I'll just say this. The person lives in Arizona, and they were born in Nebraska, so that person will now know who I'm speaking about. But what I did is the person sent me their birth chart, and I actually cast it. And I wanted to mention to this person, because she's going to know who I'm speaking about, that she has a really blessed condition in Vedic astrology. She has an exalted Jupiter. Now, anyone listening might say, well, what the heck is that? That's what I'd say, right? When I first heard that stuff. And, the angels, I always say, modern astrology likes to call us our astrology. I think it's exactly backwards. I think the Nadi and the Vedic astrology, and this also relates to our topic tonight, really is a reflection of the soul. And the religions have demonized astrology continues. Oh, it's the work of the devil, right? It's actually the exact opposite. It seems to be the work of the soul. And our soul reflection seems to be in the ancient Vedic and Nadi astrology. It's literally a reflection, or almost like a refractive mirror that's showing where the soul is and where it's going. And of course, we got free will. There's no question we all have free will. So anyways, back to what I was going to say here about this individual. I can see she's had a really rough life emotionally, because there's also a debilitated Mars in the chart conjunct that exalted Jupiter, and it aspects the moon. So a lot of pain with the mother, likely. And what's really interesting is these kinds of souls really grow. We all go through a lot of pain in these lives, and life ain't easy on the planet Earth. It's not easy at all. We all go through a lot of pains, trials, and tribulations. But some of us are here inflicting pain, while others of us are here receiving it, and all points in between. And I just wanted to mention that this person was a really good soul, and that I really appreciated that letter. It was very heartwarming. 3 pages of a handwritten letter. Good handwriting too, by the way, I got to say.
Beautiful, beautiful. Very, very heartwarming. Very, very kind. I wish you all the best, Jeff, and I wish you, both of us wish you the best.
And thank you for the heartfelt letter. It was we really appreciate what you said. You said you really appreciated the podcast, which I thought was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So just getting back to the current events.
Yes, the current events. Clearly, I would have to say the other thing I wanted to bring up tonight is, again, we mentioned in the last podcast that China had literally brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Well, that looks like that really went through. And what we're seeing here is not just against the United States, but the entire Western financial world, which we can include Europe in this, we can include Australia and many other westernized nations. There seems to be, again, a global effort against, you could say, the freedom of the world right now. And isn't this interesting that Russia, a communist nation, or certainly a socialist one, is banding together with China? And there seems to be something very eerie going on, even in the upper echelons of the United States, that's affecting the rest of the world. And that is, this whole climate change situation where they're basically pushing climate change on us. Well, China is literally, from what I hear, is building 2 coal plants a week. Now, if that's true, I don't know how you can build 2 in a week, but if that's true, and they're building at least at a very high rate, the coal plants, and they're also agreeing to buy all of Russia is selling China all their oil. Worse yet, they're now beginning to agree that all the transactions will be happening in Russia and China currencies, which is, again, a further problem for the USD. So there's almost as though a complete destruction of the United States dollar. It's really, really not good at all. And what I think is going to happen here is they are trying to crash the United States and the westernized financial systems so they can literally put in a China-like face recognition, USG type digital currency, where literally, you have all your carbon tax, and it's basically a control system. Let's see if they're successful. I think we're going to see a real war between the globalists and the nationalists that are going to go on over this next couple of years. And we're going to see, I think, a crazy time here in the U.S., which is directly going to affect the rest of the world. Because we've had a lot of comments that people say I'm not mentioning anything about the rest of the world. And I don't mean to not include other countries, because I'd say the westernized countries are the ones that this global war is against. Clearly in Europe, clearly in Australia, New Zealand, and other westernized countries. We're seeing some very serious erosions of freedom, and also, you could say, our ability to operate as a free society. And yet at the same time, we're seeing Russia and China, Saudi Arabia and Iran not playing by the rules. They're probably emitting more carbon emissions than we ever did at this point. It's really getting to be quite an interesting scenario.
It sure is. It sure is. Well, I'm glad you're addressing this, because we're all living this in this world nowadays, and it's really a sight to see right now. It really, really is. And this makes me want you to please go into our topic, which is our God-given intuition, and how that is repressed in so many different ways, but how the astrology speaks to it, right? Because it really, really does.
Yes, thank you, Ella. This is definitely a topic that is really dear to me. And, I have to say, the more I study the ancient systems of Nadi and Vedic astrology and its philosophical tenets and some of the rabbinical texts, very profound. And they're also in the Christian texts too, and especially in the ancient ones prior to getting it so dogmatized by the church. So here's where I want to go with this. And in order to get into what I would call intuition, right, I would take this down the rabbit hole even further. And you really have to talk about who are we as human beings and what is astrology as a, you could say, celestial science, or if you want, really, truly astronomy. And that's where I really was resonant with the ancient systems, the way they talked about it. The sun is the seed of creation. The moon is the crucible. Dad puts the seed in mom's womb. Farmer puts the seed in the ground. Or you could look at any animal or any system on this planet that's of life. It always ends up spirit manifest. I don't care if it's a plant life, an animal life, or a human life. It's very precious and very sacred and very, very intricate. And science has yet to come even remotely close to duplicating it. We can splice genes, we can do all this stuff, but creating life from scratch is something science has not achieved, and I don't know that they ever will. AI is never going to be life. It's a machine. So here's where I'm going with this, and I want to switch now to a very important set of diagrams that I love to bring up, and I've brought these up before, but these diagrams are really useful. So again, one of my favorite diagrams to talk about is this one right here. See, this right here is what we call the division that psychology likes to refer to as the conscious mind below, all this down here, and the subconscious mind above. So when we talk about intuition, we first have to talk about what is intuition actually evaluated by: the lower conscious mind, or what we would call the present personality. And this is really an interesting psychological journey when you think about it. Why? Because every one of us, when we were born, we were spanked on the rear end in the delivery room, or however we came into this world. We couldn't talk, we couldn't walk, and we couldn't even feed ourselves, right? If it wasn't for mom and dad taking care of us, or certainly mother, we would never have existed, right? And same thing with the animals. See, just like the earth, if it wasn't nurturing the plant and giving it root and giving it, water and sustenance, it would never grow. It's the same thing. So the lower conscious mind, at least in a human being, is a nice word in the Aramaic and Hebrew called the nefesh. Now you'll find if you study the Vedantic literature, the Tibetan literature, the Egyptians all had other names for it. In the West, we can just keep this simple. Instead of calling it the nefesh, we could just call it simply the lower conscious mind. Okay, so when you think about that, I always liken it to the keyboard, the mouse, and the screen we control these computers with. Secondly, another good analogy might be it's the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the brakes like you drive a car with. It's not us, it's the interface between the higher senses of self, which we could just generally term as the intuition, and the lower conscious mind. Because the lower conscious mind is like silly putty. And a lot of people are familiar with the terms in mind control. We've heard of many different versions of mind control, and we know it exists, right? We've seen it. In fact, mind control is present in almost every part of daily life. Look at advertising. Not that it's mind control, but it certainly is influential, right? First, you create a problem. You're sick, right? Okay, here's the solution. And then they'll spend at least 3/4 of the commercial telling you about all the side effects that you could get from it, right? And to take this down the rabbit hole even further, and this is very, very interesting stuff, is they say if you quieted the conscious lower mind enough, they literally said that you would clear the elementals. And this, we talked about last podcast about the guardian angel, that literally we are so cluttered with, they call them clip-offs or shells or thought form elementals. The Far Easterners call it samskara, that we're clouded. We're like a dirty window that needs to be cleaned off. And they actually say the angels call us amphitherean. That was an ancient Greek word that means hemmed in. We're so full of what we believe that they can't even get to us. And you know, it's just the centerpiece of what a lot of motivational speakers speak about. And that is to set goals and then have belief in them and then get out of the way and let them happen, as well as taking action towards them. It's interesting stuff.
Very, very, very interesting. What comes to my mind is conditioning and how that affects us, how it affects our judgment, how that represses our intuition. We're all conditioned in some way.
These are the elementals.
These are the elementals, but I feel also that these are demonic energies that are coming in to repress that intuition. I felt it myself. I've experienced that myself for sure.
Glad you brought that up. Now enters astrology. Astrology has been demonized through a long period of time by certain religions. And really what I find is the astrology is the karmic elementals releasing, and there's also a lot of demonic forces down on this planet that seek to pull us all down. And, you know, we've heard a lot of tales, and they're not tales, they're actually true. I've seen it, a possession. And they say if you're stiff-necked in this world, you're likely to be stiff-necked in the next, in the astral worlds. And I encourage people to read the Sharai Hagilgam, or the Sharar Hagilgam. That is a text that I mentioned in our video about the souls. And what's so cool about that video is, or that book, I should say, particularly, that book describes that there's different levels of the soul. And of course, we call them dead people and ghosts. But when people leave the body, the consciousness that you leave this lifetime with is going to go with you in the next quote unquote world. And this is very interesting because, again, I'm not here to bash certain religions, but they've done little to shed a lot of light on this, you know, and there's a lot of good things that religions put out, but they really have shed little light on this whole element of you literally take with you what you believe. It stays with you. Read the Magus of Strovlos. He has story after story after story of disincarnate souls who are on the astral plane that didn't even know they were dead. Read Dr. Carl Wickland's book, 30 Years Among the Dead. So one of the things is really good to get to your intuition is to quiet the mind, or to allow your belief systems to be subdued a bit in meditative states. And it's really positive, because what happens is we start to open up and we start to focus on things that are coming into the intuition. And demonic forces, another book I love to mention is the Screw Tape Letters. The Screw Tape Letters was written by C.S. Lewis. So amazing stuff. And if we go back into the ancient mystery schools, which again have been bashed by some of the religions, we find that one of the things that they used to do in the ancient mystery schools is to teach that the lower conscious mind can be filled with a lot of erroneous beliefs. And it's not to say that all our belief systems are wrong by any means, but critical thinking and questioning your beliefs is at the centerpiece of some of your best psychology and psychiatric work, is to get people to realize that a lot of phobias, a lot of belief systems are just that. They may not be based in true reality or objective reality. And this, again, look at mind control. If anyone's familiar with that, what they do is they traumatize an animal or a person, and then they reward them when they do what they want. So we always avoid pain. We go towards pleasure, right? So this is how mind control works. And in a sense, this has been used by a lot of regimes throughout history. You do what we want, you get pleasure. You get to live. You don't do what we want, we will hurt you. So this is very interesting stuff, because when you analyze the lower conscious mind, it's fear-based in a lot of ways. And intuition is really blocked. And our intuitive conscious upper cells are very blocked during fear. And we notice, if you listen to the white noise, oftentimes of the media and the world at large, is fear, 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 fear. Not that a lot of it is accurate, too. There is a lot of crime and a lot of stuff going on, but it's clearly almost white noise that clouds the lower connection between the intuition of the upper self and the soul to the lower self.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like it wants to put you in a state of fear. It wants that energy that you're talking about wants to keep us in a state of fear so that we're not in touch with our intuition, so that we're not in touch with our, what we call higher self, right? Which is what you get in touch with when you do meditate and when you are quiet and all of that. I mean, just a basic example of what I think about when I think of intuition, just basic. Let's say you're walking down a street and you feel a certain energy, something telling you, you shouldn't be walking there, right? That's your intuition saying you shouldn't be walking there. Now, maybe you'll cross the street and maybe you won't. Maybe if you didn't cross the street, you'd trip and fall, or, you'd bump into somebody and they take your purse, or whatever it is. That intuition, I think, is a lot greater than what we might think. What I mean is where it's coming from, where that message is coming from.
Yep. And then
that's where I think angels come in, actually. That's when angels come into it, because they really are, we all have our guardian angel or angels, and they really are protecting us and trying to guide us if we would only listen.
That's very true. And I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. And I mean, many psychics and intuitives that I've worked with and we all have heard of, they can get some very accurate information on that. And it's wonderful stuff. I love it. The other thing you brought up that I like a lot is the demonic forces. I think the smartest thing the spirits ever did was convince us they didn't exist, because they do. And, literally, I mentioned the screw tape letters. You can see how they actually stand outside of our consciousness, influencing us, getting to think certain things and certain, intuitions. So we can be pulled one way or another. And it's very important, I think, to be aware of that. Reading the screw tape letters is really an interesting read. It's about a little demon who reports to his uncle Screwtape, who's a upper demon, or you could say a lower demon in this case. And it's written in satire, but I think the most encouraging thing about that is C.S. Lewis says, I cannot disclose whether this book is fact or fiction, nor can I disclose where it came from. But he said, just read it. And there's scenario after scenario after scenario of human life where the spirits try and pull us astray. And you mentioned intuition. Now, this is something that many of the religions have rightly said. We all have a consciousness. We all have a conscience, and that's very true. Everyone has an innate center of knowing right from wrong, though it gets obscured and pulled away, especially when people get a little slavishly towards the pleasure side, like take addiction and drugs and alcohol. People get so much pleasure that pretty soon their intuition is completely obscured because they just do it to their own physical detriment. Right.
Or greed. Greed is another one that can do that.
Yeah. Look at Washington. Look at, I really think we're seeing the new one world order buy off everyone through greed and fear.
Right. Greed and fear. Exactly what we're talking about. Those are the two big ones that really do block us from getting in touch with our higher self.
They sure do. They really do. That's two big ones. And again, the religions have mentioned this oftentimes, and there's a lot of truth to that. I really encourage people to read the Sha'ar HaGilgam or Sha'ar HaGilgam, because it's very complex, but it talks about how there's myriads of different levels of souls. They call them yaburs that join us. And they call it other lower conscious minds called nefesh actually come in and join us at certain times in our life. And what I've observed in astrology is that there are certain cycles that you go through that if we were aware of, we would find these are releasement points. And the more you're aware of that, the more you can control how those new planting releasement points and new seed points in your life happen. So we look at it in astrology as well. We had a transit, we had a progression. But if you really back that up and say, well, maybe that's actually an angelic force or karmic force releasing itself.
Ooh.
And I really believe that that's what's happening. In other words, whenever I see someone getting a new progressed moon, that I can tell you right there, the sun is the seed, the moon is the crucible. You are going to go through a spiritual release. You are going to go through a releasement of some spiritual energy and a joinment of another. Now, if you had free will, awareness of this, in other words, we all have free will, but if you had awareness of this very acutely, wouldn't you go out of your way to attract and plant new seeds that were better?
Oh, gosh, absolutely.
You bet. So this is what I love about
the astrology, because it is such a guide. It really, really is. If you pay close attention and if you open yourself up to it, it really is a guide.
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things that I look for when I do readings. It's like, okay, great. Are we going to literally have that window opening up anytime soon? Or are we in a phase right now where we're dissipating? So this is very complex stuff. But now enters the old world of Nadi astrology, where they literally have all these divisions of karma. And it's pretty wild because they're foreign terms, because they come out of the ancient Dravidian, Sanskrit, and Tamil, and Hindi. And they're very obscure to understand, but I've been fascinated with them. Like in astrology, you literally have a matrix of releasement and attraction on the soul. Like they'll say, for instance, you take, well, like the lady we were just speaking about earlier, and even in my own life, you can actually see when you hit certain fire trines and air trines, there is certain forces you need to dissipate. You can't get out of it. It's called actually a parubdha karma. It's a strange word that just means these are karmas that have become ripe that have to be processed out on the physical plane. Now think about that. If you knew that, you would go into this with a more open attitude. Instead of feeling like a victim or so on and so forth, you might say, well, okay, these are energies that need to be dissipated. There are other times where we have much more free will. Those seem to be indicated by the water and the air trines, which is the moon, see, the crucible, which brings nurturing to energies. So it's very fascinating to watch this stuff. This stuff has been lost. It's not fully you could say, discernible as it used to be, I think, in ancient times. And I believe that because I see the texts, I see the way it's spoken about. There was a time of great knowledge. And it's very interesting because as the solar system passes around the central sun, and I know the flat earthers don't buy that, but certainly it's a celestial model, whether it's physical or not, it certainly seems to be happening in this matrix here on the earth. And it's clearly a divine matrix of the soul. And I think we're in a period right now in terms of evolution of humanity that we're really in a kind of a dark age. And it's been that way for a while. Now, I think we're coming out of it. I know a lot of astrologers will say, oh, we're in the Aquarian age. Well, does this really seems like the Aquarian age right now? We've got a new one world order. We've got eugenics going on. We've got borders being flooded. We've got an entire world here that's being conquered by technocratic communism. It's a new technology.
Yeah. Well,
so I'm not trying to create fear. I'm trying to create awareness. And the game is to get the lower conscious mind. And it is. Right.
Well,
which blocks intuition.
Thank you. Which I was just going to say that, which blocks intuition. And that goes back to the fear. So yeah, really, really, really important to look deep, right? I always try to just watch my mind, watch my intentions, watch the messages that are coming through. Obviously, we look at our charts all the time and, we know when certain progressions are coming and all these energies. And I love what you said about being open to these energies. And it's a cleansing almost. That's my interpretation of what you were saying. If you really tap into it, it's an opportunity to cleanse because these energies are going to happen no matter what. So, but you have said one can maybe change their astrology a bit.
Well, I would rephrase that to one can change their reaction to the energies that the astrology is showing. And that's it right there. See, it's like driving a car down the road. And that's a really good analogy, because when we're going down the road, you're going to be subject to what everybody else does. You can't control the other drivers. You can't control the traffic. You can't control the weather, right? But what you can do is you can control your awareness and your reaction to it.
Right. Not
therein is the power.
Said control. Yeah, I didn't mean control. I meant more maybe change your astrology. We've talked about that in a sense, like if you move, location astrology has a hand in that, in a sense.
Well, yes, it does. And gemstones can drastically alter it too. Yeah, you bet. And even numerology of your name, all these things are very powerful things to alter, or you could say skew the energy. Now, it's interesting because the last podcast, we got into a subject that is very dear to me. And that is, there's an old phrase, and the religions had rightly quoted this. Then you may have heard this. It says, Israel's above astrology. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're all Israel, whether anyone wants to agree with that or not. My opinion is we're all divinity, and we're all the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, where am I going with this? Well, if the soul is attached hundreds of dimensions above what our lower conscious and physical bodies are, well, clearly we're all above the astrology. And I think what was trying to be achieved by many of the sacred texts is if we could get out of our lower myopic programming, where the demonic spirits can influence us and do, and our own elementals also influence us, we would connect to the higher selves, which we would call intuition, but it's far much more than that, because you have the spirit, the lower portion of the soul, and then you have the upper portion of the soul, and then the very Godhead divinity of the soul. And again, the tree of life is one way of looking at this that's very relatable to us in our lower conscious minds. It's far more complex than that, but it's a way to wrap our lower finite minds around it. One of the things that always irritated me a little bit was that why would God block us from remembering past lives or remembering their karmic intuition and connections? Well, here's a good answer possibly to that. And it's actually put forth in several sacred ancient texts. They said, if we could see all the spirits, the demons, the elementals, the thought form elementals, also the disincarnate souls, we call them dead people and ghosts, we might not be able to handle it. In fact, it would be so distracting that we wouldn't even be able to focus on this life down here that we've all created for ourselves. So it's really interesting because the game would be up. We would not be immersed into these physical worlds where all the free will and the ego and everything can happen. But many of us are striving for higher conscious awareness, and many people are not happy in their lives. And I think if, many spiritual people have said this, you can be in this world, but not of it, is one way of saying it.
Absolutely.
I love the human race. It's just a lot of people that drive me nuts, right?
Right. So, be in this world, but not of it. Krishnamurti used to say that all the time. And that is so true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Tibetan lamas.
But
it's challenging.
It's challenging, but
the Tibetan lamas and the yogis and the Egyptians in the mystery schools, Pythagoras, Hermes Trismegistus, so many others would mention that they would take disciples and get them out of secular society where all the business and the hate and the stuff and getting advantage and money was going on every day. And they'd put them in wilderness places or in caves, and they would teach them rituals to focus the conscious mind on direct intentions, very powerful focused intentions. And they would create elementals, and they would teach them that the lower conscious mind is really like silly putty. Mm-hmm. Here's a great example.
You can easily manipulate it. Yeah.
You bet. And take anyone, you can move them to a different locality in the world. And it won't be long. I don't care how young or old you are. You will greatly be influenced by the customs. Some people won't, but most people will. They'll start taking a little bit on of the accent. They'll take on some of the customs of the local community, whatever it is. You see, the demonic forces are very aware of this. This is why they're trying to create mass chaos right now, because they love mass chaos. See, if we can get the world to go into mass chaos, then that'll influence everybody. It'll now become more acceptable as a norm. And it's easier to control chaos than it is to control people who have critical thinking and order.
Right, right. Sure
this is why, when you look at what's happening to the world right now, look at Europe, look at the dissension that's going on there. I hear the same thing in Australia, New Zealand, other parts of the world, the United States, Canada. So many people are telling me, wow, it's like, I feel like our leaders are like communists. Well, I wonder why. Maybe they're being influenced by some very demonic people at the top who really are possessed by demonic elementals, and they want to destroy order, chaos, traditions, and customs, and get everybody to be in chaos.
I believe.
Well, if we resist that, we resist that and follow our true divine intuition, maybe we'd be in a lot better place.
Well, my intuition tells me that we can do that.
We can. We absolutely can. So this is a topic we could go on forever, and
but this has been awesome. Yeah, this is one to continue for sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff, as always. And thank you, everyone, so very much for watching. And please leave your comments and take good care of yourselves. Don't let anything block your intuition, your higher self.
There you go. And thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.